My squats used to look like this, and now they look like this. If you're new here, I'm Keisha. I am a certified personal trainer and content creator on a mission to help women become the strongest version of themselves. And today I want to take you through everything I did to transform my squats from this to this, and how I also help my clients do this and just generally improve their squat form and performance. As you might have guessed, mobility is one of the major factors that's going to influence our squat depth. Having decent ankle and hip mobility is going to be the determining factor for whether or not your body can reach these deeper squat positions. Therefore, I like to do really in-depth dynamic warm-ups to help with some of those mobility factors. So I like to do some of these deep squat sits with some hip rotations. I also go into some deep lunges. Rolling forward onto that ankle like I'm doing here is really going to help stretch out the calf, which can also help with our ankle mobility. Good ankle mobility is what is going to allow our knee to travel past our toe, which is why I also do dynamic sits in front of a solid object, pulling myself forward into a deep squat position, really stretching that ankle and the hip and getting comfortable in this deep squat position. We don't just want to do stretches for our mobility though, we also want to do strengthening work. So I also incorporate hip flexor strengthening drills to help with my hip flexor strength, which is going to be really important for that hip hinge in the squat. It's important to remember that no two people will squat exactly the same. There are numerous variables that are going to affect what positioning is going to be ideal for you. Bearing that in mind, people typically fall into two categories when it comes to selecting their ideal squat stance or foot position. In order to figure this out, we're going to do a quick assessment of your internal and external rotation of the femur. Sitting on a chair, we're going to lift our foot slightly off the ground. We're going to keep our femur still as we internally rotate it. Then we're also going to externally rotate it. So what we're paying attention to is which direction has more range of motion. So you can see I don't have very much external rotation mobility, but I have a decent amount of internal rotation. So if you're like me and you have pretty good internal rotation, you're going to select a closer stance with your toes facing forward for your squats. And if you have better external rotation, you're going to select a wider stance with your toes pointed slightly out. Now that we've selected our squat stance position, we're going to do some warm-ups with the bar or a lighter weight in order to ensure that we are thoroughly warmed up and ready to squat with a heavier weight. 1 to 2 sets of warming up with the bar should be adequate if you did go ahead and do the dynamic warm-up. But there's one more thing that we need to practice and master before we actually add weight on our barbell squats. One of the most important components of doing any compound lift, squats, deadlifts, is our breathing. We need to do something called bracing. Now, most people have a misconception about what bracing means. They think it's sucking the stomach in and squeezing everything in. It's actually the complete opposite of that. We actually want to allow our abdomen to expand and bring air into our abdomen in order to increase something called intra-abdominal pressure. By increasing the pressure in our abdomen, we are actually creating a much more stable surface and positioning for our torso in order to keep that spine straight and stable. So to properly brace, we're going to pretend I'm at the top of my squatting movement, and we're going to think about breathing in, not into our chest. If our chest rises like this, then we're breathing into our chest. We want to breathe into our core, into our diaphragm. So we want to think about allowing our abdomen to expand. It is going to make your stomach look a little bit bigger, but that's okay. That's what we want. So we're going to think about breathing into our abdomen, going down in the squat, and then as we're coming up out of the squat, we're going to breathe out. Now we want to keep our core tight throughout this process, so we want to think about breathing in, keeping that air in, and bearing down on that pressure, but we're not thinking about sucking in, we're not vacuuming our stomach, we're just tensing it while that air inside of our abdomen is expanding. Now that we're warmed up, we've selected an appropriate squat stance, and we know how to brace properly. Now it's time for some squat drills. Improving our depth comes down to being able to control the entirety of the movement. This is why I like to implement tempo training for myself and my clients, because it helps to build strength, and control throughout the entirety of the movement. As you can see here, I am practicing some slow eccentrics and pauses at the bottom of my squat. Doing this for a few weeks will build up your strength and control throughout the movement, especially in the hardest portion of the movement, which is coming out of the hole. Practice maintaining tension in your glutes throughout the lowering portion. Re-engage them as you drive out of the hole. Before we increase weight or our squat depth, I want you to go through a checklist of 3 major mistakes made during squats. This is the first mistake, which is allowing my heels to come off the ground. I am exaggerating here. This may be much more subtle in practice. My second mistake is I am engaging in butt wink. Now, butt wink is not inherently bad, but we typically want to avoid it for the longevity of our squat performance. You can see as I'm getting to the bottom of my squat, my pelvis is tilting posteriorly. It looks like my butt is flicking down as I hit the bottom of the squat, which will inevitably put tension on my low back. The last mistake I'm making is that I am doing a good morning to get out of the squat. Basically, I am hinging out. I am allowing my hips to drive up before my shoulders drive up, which is again going to put a lot of tension on my low back. If you're engaging in any of these mistakes, go back to the previous steps, ensure that your ankle mobility is adequate, ensure that you are using proper squat stance, and that you are bracing properly. Once your form looks similar to this, where your feet are flat on the ground, your hips and shoulders rise simultaneously, and your pelvis remains fairly neutral, you are ready to go up in weight or increase your squat depth. I hope this video was helpful. Please keep in mind this will not be an overnight process. It may take some time to get there, but with time and consistency, I do believe that you can have beautiful squat form. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for future fitness tips, and let me know in the comments what video you want to see next.